Hey everybody. Thanks for coming in. Today it's going to be a slightly different kind of setup as usual. So I think a good part of the LimaCharlie team was at RSA. RSA, for those that haven't been, kind of is cybersecurity conference, but like it's kind of like Black Hat, but there's a different type of audience, and so I think it'll be an interesting discussion. We thought of just like having a discussion around sort of like a debrief, what we've been seeing, what we thought was interesting. um you know Anybody that wants to participate, please do. This is not sort of like rehearsed or singular at all. Usually we have a guest for those that are coming in for the first time, but this week it's going to be a bunch of different guests having that chat. Um cool. Yeah. So, well, actually, I just see in the chat that, like, here's a good question, right? Like, any theme. Like, I'm curious to get, is there a specific theme that anybody here has kind of like identified as the real thing? Any thoughts on that?
But there was less AI than I expected. So that was kind of a happy surprise. And it felt like there was a lot of compliance and audit companies, which was a bit of a surprise. I feel like Vanta has sparked something that a lot of people are trying to follow or duplicate, or a lot of the vendors I talked to that were doing auditing and stuff were partnering with or aiming to partner with Vanta. So seems to be a growing part of the sector.
Yeah, I had the same thought. It's like, and I won't say anti-theme, and I think we kind of talked about that briefly at some point, where it makes sense that you didn't have as many like really big booths, like very visible from AI, like the kind of the pure play AI, like new companies. You had all the big vendors that mentioned AI, but I think most of these companies that are really like founded into that are on the smaller side of the scale. So, it's like smaller booths, like a little bit more spread out over. So it was kind of like not the anti-theme, but like not as many. And in compliance, yeah, I was also surprised at the amount of stuff around compliance that was there, which it's kind of a good thing, I think.
Yeah, and I read some stats. So there was 44,000 attendees, more than 44,000 attendees this year, which I think is like the record so far. So it seems like any downtrend from COVID is over, and people are back at it. It felt
Yeah.
busy.
Yeah, it was a zoo. It was a zoo for sure, in a good way. What else? Ken, what about you? What did you think this year?
Yeah, well, I got to do a training, which was great, but also kind of popped my head into some other workshops. And I think what was neat to see was, AI has gone beyond like, it's in the product or whatever, but actually training people how to use it and leverage it. Kind of like what I was talking about you earlier. I think every time I see the AI stuff, I just like I kept thinking soil and green, because if you really dig into what's behind all these AI, it's people, not just the people using the tools, but also training the tools with real data and things like that. So having conversation with people about that, like it kind of stumps some people when you start asking, like, like, what's the manifest look like when you're training these models? Where does the data come from? And what data is it being trained on? Are you training it on my queries as well? Like, you really kind of dig into it. You kind of have these interesting discussions, and most vendors are able to start answering some of those. And I think that's a lot of just the industry itself, I think, maturing, that we no longer think of AI as the snake oil that's going to replace all of our stock and take all of our jobs, but talking more about how it's going to actually make us more productive. And I'm even seeing that in the products where AI is actually being implemented, right? It's not like this magical thing that happens, black box. It's actually something that, requires feedback, and it kind of helps the SOC analyst as they're working through their daily tasks. So I thought that was really actually refreshing to see, even though, everyone has to have AI in their product now, right? I think, even if they did in the last couple of years, now everyone has AI and some capability in their product. And it's really nice to see how it's matured really around the analyst, right? Versus replacing them. Kind of what I told you before, Android versus a cyborg, right?
Yeah, for sure. A lot less pure Copilot, and a lot. It felt like it's like in between, right? It's not just the Copilot stuff, but it's also I didn't see many large kind of capabilities that are sort of like really built around AI entirely. It felt like we're at that middle point where it makes a drastic difference on leveraging the bigger tool that exists. But it's also not just like generating text for people, but like actually helping people build into their tool, like doing like the adoption, all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I really liked like looking at some of the like the product demos, even from competitors and things, and how they've integrated AI into the user experience. I think that was really kind of really interesting to me. It's not like this thing's just going to do everything for you, but how they've integrated into the workflows and things like that as well. It makes a lot of like kind of kind of brain dead types of things that you used to do, like as an analyst, like going to run their threat intel searches and all that stuff. Automating a lot more of those processes and summarizing things for humans, identifying patterns and presenting them to humans. I don't think we're at the point now where we trust AI to actually take a lot of action still. But I don't know. Like I've always been kind of nervous about that. But I rode my first Waymo while I was there, so maybe I'm trusting AI a little bit more than normal. But it did try to kill us because it did like try to pick us up on a really bad street on like Sixth Street in the Tenderloin district, and there was like the police everywhere. There was all these police cars, and then we had to like actually go towards the crime scene, I think, to get into our Waymo. Um, but once we were in, we felt safe, and yeah, it was fun. But yeah, I
it
think
for anybody that doesn't know what Ken's talking about, Waymo, Waymo, if you look it up online, is a San Francisco taxi cab company that's fully autonomous. So they use lidar. They have like spinning lidar sensors on the front and on all the corners. And yeah, it's super weird. You order them on your phone. It flashes your initials on top, and you just get in, and the thing drives. And they're really impressive. They'll like speed up for yellow lights and stuff like that. Like it feels like a person driving. So
yeah,
definitely getting close to this future we've been talking about.
I was super impressed. It was really neat. It was fun too.
Yeah, and we think about attack surface, it's like how long till somebody's got those under control, right?
Oh gosh, could you imagine that? All the chaos you could cause.
Yeah.
A DOS attack ends up, causing hundreds of crashes into a single city. Like that, that's a big impact.
Yeah,
I did
direct
I
call
did
to
see a
1.
video on YouTube of these protesters stopping them by putting a pylon cone on the hood. The car didn't know what to do because it's got safety features and stuff. So they just like plunk a pylon on the hood of the car, a street pylon, and they'd stop.
Uh, the other thing that I thought was interesting, that like for me anyway, I got out of it, was that there's a I don't know exactly how to say that, but like there's more and more different, like there's fragmentation in cybersecurity, right? When I started, cybersecurity was what, like, AV, network security. You could kind of like put like five acronym and you would cover like 98% of cybersecurity. And this year it felt like there's a ton of different like niches that really popped up. I met with two different companies that, like, what they do is the identification through remote means. So like, hey, how do I know the person I'm talking to over Zoom is actually that person? And doing like biometrics and deepfake detection and all of that. And so it's as if this is becoming its own little industry, because RSA is like cybersecurity. It like everything is in there. So you can kind of like learn about a ton of different capabilities there.
I talked to a really cool startup up in the startup expo, so like very early, and the guy's technology was helping to yeah, confirm user identity by physical key strikes. I think the company's actually called Keystrike, but it was pretty cool. And he gave me a lockpick set. I purposely didn't get much swag, but I couldn't say no to the pick set.
Nice, nice. I heard actually from those companies, I heard a really good story about how they caught, I think it was a North Korean trying to get a job in a company, but they caught that person not through actually technical means. But what happened is that apparently that attacker just went on Google and like searched for like American male picture kind of thing, but probably not knowing anything about culture. They ended up picking Ryan Reynolds picture. And so they got in a call and it's like, I don't think Ryan Reynolds is applying for a job in my sock. And so that's how they ended up being able to catch it. I thought like it was hilarious.
I watched a presentation around some of the North Korean like IT insider threat workers, and one thing they found was they usually end up being star employees because it makes sense because they got like 10 people working up from behind the scenes, right? And one thing they did find was that they use the same resumes and the same names oftentimes. But I was thinking, oh God, what if I started like a shadow company, like sort of like a canary thing, and like just have them build an app for me? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know.
New business now. We're going to make a company that can hire them, but that has processes to shield the internals of the real company so that you can get the benefit of like really, really good, great workers without exposing internal stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the goal of that was to get them promoted because then if they become managers or whatever, like lead developers, they get additional credential access. So I just thought that was fascinating. Not only are they getting hired, but they also become the star employees and move up the ranks. I mean, how far are we from like that happening to some sort of AI entity, right?
Oh, man.
Somebody asked about MCP, which I know is something that's like very dear to our hearts because we just added the MCP layer to LimaCharlie. So they asked if there's any good implementations that look promising, and this was something I was bringing up to a lot of the AI SOCs because now that we have that capability, I was sort of maybe there's an integration or somebody we could work with there, and it didn't seem like a lot of people were super well versed in it. At least like the booths that I talked to, like everybody was aware of it, but I didn't. They were still running on APIs and still using the sort of we'll call it the old-fashioned model now.
And yes, and I thought like it makes complete sense, that I thought that was really interesting because it's so new. uh, a Most of the people that I talked to that were building products in AI had the same feeling as like candidly we did internally, which is the technology is moving so fast that we talked to like a bunch of AI SOCs and we mentioned MCP and it's like, yeah, MCP is cool, but we've been building this for a year. So our architecture does not work with that like at all. We want to move to, towards that, but right now it's all APIs. So I thought that was interesting. And the few products that I saw that did have an MCP server had an interesting spin, which was they tend to be pretty high order functionality. So like when I saw MCP kind of being announced, where I went to in my mind was, well, I'm going to open up our API to MCP so that essentially AIs can easily sort of leverage the API and go and do things. But it looks like most of the vendor space went higher level and said, hey, what we're going to open up to MCP is I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but like find badness kind of level, right? Like, oh, investigate this binary, and then it does a whole bunch of things and then reports that through the server. So it's not as much discovery of tools as much as like a way for maybe an agent that really doesn't know much about the tool at all to get kind of the distilled value from it, which is interesting.
Yeah, adjacent to that too, a lot of companies dealing with non-human identities. Like that seems to be like its own emerging, area of cybersecurity and makes sense given the sort of agentic future we're looking at, right? So
Which sounds super cool. It sounds very like aliens are among us.
it's just
But
API keys though, right?
well, that's kind of the thing I was wondering throughout. Like, I'm sure it's not that simple,
Yeah.
but I thought like service accounts, API keys, IAM, but
But I imagine with agents, you're going to start to have like behavioral stuff that's non-human, and so then it's like, is the key for this agent doing the thing that it was designed for? Like I can see it growing as like the surface evolves.
I think it's funny how as we sort of build new technologies to solve these security problems, we create new
We
security
create new
problems along the way. I mean, I had a talk with some folks from Hidden Layer, and where they were talking about MCP servers, and I was like thinking about, and now there's like 4,000 MCP servers. Everyone's building them. Everyone has to have one, and then sometimes there's not a lot of thought that's going into their implementation. And they're even talking about, yeah, they're already finding like ways to do prompt injection into some of those initial requests for the list of services. So I think there's going to be even more, like maybe next year you're gonna have a booth like the MCP security booth, or some new startups are going to start rising up to kind of deal with it. So yeah, chicken and egg.
Yeah, the best quote I heard is the S in MCP stands for security. And it's very close to reality if you look at the implementations out there and the protocol. There's one thing that is shockingly absent, and it's any real mention around security. I know when we implemented it internally, we're kind of lucky because we were able to just say, well, we're going to reuse JOTs that we use for authentication for our API, and it's all the same things. But you can really tell that it's on the cutting edge. It's weird.
Yeah, and how fast it's getting rolled out is, we were talking to Owen Wickens a couple weeks ago, I think, from Hidden Layer, and he was commenting on like the speed at which AI is being rolled out, and there's people red teaming and putting guardrails up, but like nobody's even really looking at the software supply chain. There's all these weird little academic libraries being used, and yeah, it's first to market wins, I guess.
Yeah. The other thing that I thought was interesting, but I don't know if I paid as much attention before, but there is quite a few service providers at RSA this year, or people that had a much bigger component around services to what they did. So maybe it's my bias, like that I didn't really look that carefully. Ken, you were saying you've been to a lot of RSAs. Am I off there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot more MSSPs. I think like people that are starting their own business. At least maybe it's because of our booth, but I was talking to a lot of folks that they're sort of narrowing down in a niche. Like they have a particular region, even maybe they're targeting a particular type of business or whatever. But I got very specific. They have sort of knowledge about that industry, like some of the compliance requirements and all of that. And so they're sort of creating these sort of smaller, sort of niche sort of MSSPs. I thought that was really interesting. Some of that's like folks that were laid off, or they whatever, but they found the need. But I think there's going to be a lot more of these sort of smaller businesses. And someone even said that to me. They came to our hall and like they really liked the kind of the South Hall because that's kind of where all the newer technologies are. They're kind of the smaller booths, versus the North Hall where it's all the huge vendors. And some of them even came to me and I was like, yeah, I can't even afford that. Some of everything that they're selling me. Then I asked the price tag and it's six figures. And he's like, I'm this small like MSP, like I don't have time for that. So they kind of liked us when we came. They even talked to us and we kind of walked them through and like the kind of the box of Legos theme that we had and all that. It really resonated with them. So I think that's kind of the difference I saw. Is just there seems to be sort of smaller, like I want to say SMB types of businesses, little startups on the MSSP side. And that was really refreshing to see.
Yeah, I talked to one company in the North Hall, Net and Rich, and they've been like a MSP for 22 years, 800-person company, and now they're, I think, year 3 into offering MSSP services. So you can really see the industry growing that way. It makes sense because you have to be a very large company to support your own security team and do it in a way that's sustainable. So MSSP, I think, is just the model that we will evolve towards as the only security solution. Maybe not the only one, but primary.
Yeah, I think it's force multipliers too. I think a lot of times you'll have people that maybe are still like a security team, but then they'll lean on like an MDR and MSSP, to help kind of force multiply that. And that helps, especially with high turnover rates and things like that. At least some of the discussions I was having with people, it's hard to keep, good security analysts, things like that. And then, someone goes and they built this whole project, the science project, and no one knows how to maintain it. And that be cause an issue with an MSSP and MDR. That kind of helps alleviate some of that.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough, the other thing that I heard more than I would have expected was about air gap. I talked to a bunch of companies, and we're talking about like how they work, what they do, like some training. One of them stuck in my mind was doing like a range, right? Like cyber range type of thing. And yeah, they're talking about how, like, yeah, we specifically build so we can go air gapped and any cloud, any kind of environment. So it's not, I think it's easy sometimes if you work a lot in the cloud stuff to think everything's in the cloud, but it's still going strong, I guess.
Yeah, I went and talked to all the folks in the startup gallery or startup exhibit, and the number of companies that had a on-prem solution just blew my mind. I thought that was sort of a thing of the past, but apparently it's very alive and well.
Maybe there's going to be a resurgence of that somehow. I'm not sure. I don't see the underlying dynamic, like why that would happen, but wouldn't that be weird?
I think it's just probably paranoia. The more like, extortion attacks and ransomware attacks, like if people are able to keep that IP separate from the internet, it makes sense.
I think there's some cost savings. I think some people have done some calculations where sometimes it's actually cheaper for them to have storage like back in a data center again, versus like some of the cloud services, depending on what they're trying to do. It really depends on their use case, but I've seen a lot of folks do that, and more home labs too. Like that's one thing it was really cool to see, is just especially around AI and LLMs and things like that, is people are building more of these home labs, and leveraging higher bandwidth. Computers are cheaper now, storage is cheaper, so you can kind of do a lot more stuff at home than you could, even, you know, whether it's on prem or in the cloud, than you ever did before.
hmm it might also sort of be an indication of the where we are in the life cycle of uh, large companies that made a lot of growth based on offering cheaper alternatives in the cloud that are now reaching us. They're now big enough that to keep that growth going, they have to, or they end up kind of regressing like the pricing back to where the natural point, what they can extract the most is, right? I'm thinking like Uber type thing, right? Where people talk about, like, it used to be way cheaper than taxi, and then over time it's kind of becoming like a fuzzy line. So I wonder if we're just kind of at that point of like Splunk and like all of these types of technologies.
I was gonna say, I'm sure when you get to a certain scale, the costs make sense, right? It's like at a smaller size, you get all the benefit of just being able to spin things up and build. But once you're in a big established enterprise, it probably makes sense to build your own rack and stack. I'm excited.
It does remind me of a discussion that we had with somebody, running a cybersecurity company, and a friend who was talking about the amount of data that they're generating, and they're doing it all in their own data center. And so, like, first, like, gut take for me was like, that's going to be expensive. Like, your FTEs, you're paying to maintain this and that. But then he got into, here's how much we're actually, consuming in data. And then it's just like on a dime, it flips the entire equation. Like, I forget exactly the numbers, but it was like,
Yeah.
I don't know, like 100 terabytes a day, and we retain it forever. And it's like, yep, like there's no,
Yeah.
no contender. Like, yep.
Yeah, it might have been a little overkill. He philosophically, I think retain it forever, everything. It's a little much, but
It's intriguing. Maybe it's going to be like someday the best archive of cybersecurity. Uh, uh, what's that word again? Like with the fossils and all of that. Like,
oh yeah, yeah.
uh, uh,
There was a woman in Philadelphia who recorded television on VHS for like years and years, thousands and thousands of tapes, and now that's being harvested as like this archival footage. Similar thing, maybe.
yeah. Thank you in the chat. Archaeology is the name I was looking for.
Digital archaeology.
So what else? What else was like big takeaways? Like, what do you guys expect for the next year? Is there a type of product that you saw that you think is going to end up like the default that everybody in the industry kind of will need to have?
Well, I'm interested in kind of more. I think there's with the AI stuff now. There's going to be more integrations, and I think with the MC, the servers and things like that. I think that's sort of the first phase, but I think that's going to open a lot of things up. One thing I did see too was also like leveraging AI for adversary types of work. So there was even like a lot of red teaming folks that were talking about leveraging agentic AI to do some of that. So which also means that the bad guys are going to be leveraging these same services, right? So how long before some of these ransomware groups start to have their own MCP servers? Like it's going to be interesting. I think how this evolves over the next year.
For sure, for sure. And like I saw somebody in the chat talking about like MCP gateways and proxies, and I don't know, hot take here, but I was talking to a Google engineer, and I was communicating what was like vaguely my feeling about this, and it was I was kind of surprised that it was really confirmed to me. Which is the feeling that like at LimaCharlie, we were building like an AI engine thing, and it was going well. And then Google released the ADK, the Agent Development Kit, and then it was like, this is great. What we had, garbage, rebuild on top of that. Like it just made total sense. But as I was building that and like the MCP gateways, I really got the distinct feeling that Google, and I don't want to pick on Google because I think it's probably everywhere, but like Google released this ADK thing and we're immediately on to the next thing. And it got me seriously worried about MCP and any kind of standardization right now in AI. I got the feeling that people that are building largely on those SDKs and those like abstraction layers, I don't know if it's going to be not resilient, but like I don't know if it's going to survive in the medium term even. So building a product on top of that, it scares me a little bit. So I don't know. What else?
Any particular booth or company or marketing thing that stood out for everybody? It's always such a circus and everybody's trying to get each other's attention. So I'm just curious if there was like a particular booth or thing somebody was doing that stuck with you guys.
I was surprised at the number of animals this year. So there was a bin
Yeah.
with puppies. There was another bin with goats where you could go feed baby goats and pet them. And I was telling Charlton that we're going to have a giraffe in our booth next year, and the term's going to be stretch your security budget. So it's probably better I'm not in marketing, but.
And I'll share a hack I figured out this year with anybody. If you're going to a conference, I went and talked to all the vendors that had socks, and now I have like 20 pairs of nice socks, and I'm like good for the next 2 years. So beats all the little plastic things you get. So
Nice, nice. One of the moves that stuck for me was I didn't unfortunately really get time to go check it out, but one of them had the new robot dogs, the Boston Dynamic clones. But it's like I think it's like 6-7K to buy them, and I think they were giving one away. So that was pretty cool, and I thought it was kind of funny because I also remembered reading reports that security in those things are really really sketchy. So at a security conference, maybe it's a Trojan horse.
yeah, that's right.
So we should get one, expense it, and do some security research. Is that what you're saying?
I'm sure there's something we can do with it. That's right. That's right. That and satellites. Those are two big
Yes.
ones we're going to do someday. Cool, cool. Well, we are pretty much at the end of time here. Thanks, guys. That was it was an interesting RSA. Good discussion. Next stop, Black Hat. Hopefully, I think maybe there's more people that are here that are going to be going to Black Hat at DEF CON or B-sides, as Ken mentioned earlier. If you are, come drop by. Don't be a stranger. And otherwise, well, have a good weekend. We'll see you next week.